good evening. I'm Rick Dancer. Welcome to Get Real with Rick Dancer. And oh man, we got a good show for you tonight. I'm excited because this is like one of my pet projects, one of my pet topics. I know you guys know I left Oregon for Montana, and it's because I'm 63 years old and I don't know that Oregon's going to change that fast. But one of the things I always promoted as a Secretary of State candidate, one of the things I was going to do if I won, was make Oregon a state where you could have an open primary. I think the closed primary thing is the biggest bunch of bullshit on the planet. And I have many reasons for that, but just one is, why should the Republicans and the Democrats own the process? Bullshit. So they get to, you and I, as non-affiliated independents, libertarians, Green Party, we're helping to pay for the primaries for the other parties to do. So we pay for their primaries and they get to decide whether I get to participate in it. That's taxation without representation. That's bullshit, and it shouldn't be happening. But it keeps happening because why? The unions, the corporations, and the parties don't want it to change because they understand how much power they have. But there's a move in Oregon right now to once again try to open the primary. And we're going to talk about that and a lot more. But that's the exciting part for me. We want to thank our sponsors tonight is Chris Dental Family Dentistry, where everyone is welcome. Also do dentures with Chris Dental. And Michael Bratlin is a controversial figure in Eugene, Springfield, because he believes in freedom of speech. I know, the new F word, freedom. Oh my gosh, we shouldn't be doing that. We don't want everybody to have a voice, do we? He's a big believer in that. Also, Albert Taylor, Endless Possibilities, an organization that works with people with different abilities to make sure that they have lives just like you and me. People with different abilities, they have dreams and hopes and aspirations just like you and me. They're part of our community, they're part of our world, and they belong here, and they're here to teach us and to enjoy their life. And these people make it happen. And also BS Free MD, they won't be joining us tonight, but tonight, right after our show, BS Free MD, they're two doctors out of here in Oregon, and they do a program called Doc Tales and Cocktails. And that airs on Wednesday nights at right after this show at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock Oregon time. And so just check them out on BS Free MD, like Bullshit Free MD. They also have a podcast that they do where they tell people all kinds of stuff about medical conditions. They're kind of edgy people. That's how I met them. So that's what's coming up. And but let's get to our topic. So I'm going to have to look at my cheat sheet. This is Michael Calcano, and that's a very cool last name. But a tongue twister for a news anchor. They probably have, I bet people, you've always had to pronounce your name, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah. I've landed on volcano, calcano. Italians are kind of hot-blooded people, so I can erupt like a volcano sometimes. But yeah, I mean, that's the way it goes. But
so, Michael, tell people who you're with, which organization you're with, and kind of give them a little history about what you guys have done or tried to do in the past.
yeah, our group is called All Oregon Votes, and we are a grassroots team of volunteers from across Oregon trying to create open primaries in Oregon. And it's been a question that has been asked before. In 2008 and 2014. There were ballot measures to create open primaries. They were defeated because there was so much out-of-state money that funneled into Oregon to try to scare people that open primaries are a bad idea. And that really prevents power from resting in the hands of we the people, right? It keeps it limited to the parties.
I find it so interesting about we Oregonians, because I'm now in Montana, but I still feel like an Oregonian, is, we are so cutting edge when it comes to the bottle bill or the beach, making sure that our beaches are open to people. But then we're so afraid to pump our own gas. And every time that comes up, it's like, and we won't open liquor stores and grocery stores, and we won't open the primary. It's like, oh my God, you guys, we have the biggest balls on the planet to do all these really hard things. And then these easy things we won't do. It's like we're afraid. And that money from those unions and those corporations and out-of-state organizations, what are they afraid of, Michael, do you think, of the primary opening up?
Yeah, I think every parent of a young kid knows that if you're trying to steer the choices of your child, you might say, oh, do you want to watch the Magic School Bus or do you want to watch Sesame Street? Those are your two choices. And It's a way to manipulate the kid to make sure that they're choosing what you want them to choose. Voters should not be manipulated like that. And
Right.
unfortunately, that's what the partisan primary does, is it controls the power of who the voters get to choose in November, right? So they're steered choices for who has the poll tested and party approved sound bites, right?
Well, and I
So
think
it's a way to control power.
I think we saw that in the governor's race in Oregon, where Betsy Johnson came in as an independent. And had the primary been open, there could have been a whole different, because that primary in May, it's the feeder to that next November election. And so if you aren't on the ballot, or you're like just a name and not part of the real, it's like the real election. You get nothing. So we have all these very libertarian people in Oregon as well, and a lot of family party. And what I think is so phony about it is that we make it, oh, well, everybody can participate and you can vote, but it's not, that's really not, I don't mean in the primary, but everybody has a fair shot. Well, they don't. Just a Republican and a Democrat really have the fair shot, and everybody else is just like, trying to get attention.
Well, it's the lesser of two evils. And how has our politics become about choosing who's going to be less worse than the other person?
Doesn't that blow you away? So how many people do you hear going, well, I'm voting for Trump because I'm not going to vote for Biden, or I'm going to vote for Biden because I wouldn't vote for, how many people voted for Biden because they hate Trump? It's like, why do we still live in a country where two old men, white, are the best we can do for president of the United States of America? Good night. Too old. They're going to be over 80 by the time this thing's over. And we don't have anybody else that we can bring. The Democrats don't have anybody other than, this guy who's slipping away, and Trump, is like an old man. And here we say we're a diverse nation of people, but we still keep electing old white men.
We have a very, very significant problem in this country with folks who have money and power who really get to control our politics. Think about this, Rick, right? Congress has an all-time low approval rating at just 18%. And yet, 95% of Congress gets reelected.
Yeah. I mean, so how... Okay, let me do a commercial break real fast. And then I want to come back and I want you to tell me, how did you get, because how old are you?
35.
Okay, so you're a pretty young dude. I mean, in my world, and I want to know how you got into this. Like, why did this, because this is like my magic button and I just want to hear. So let me run a couple of ads here real fast. Hang on.
One of the biggest things for people that I have supported, one of their complaints has always been, why do they talk to me like I'm a baby? Why can't they talk to me like they're talking to you? And they're absolutely right. They're very smart. The people we support are very intelligent. And so when you talk to them as if you're talking to a small child, it's offensive. And so, yeah, I think educational videos, bringing that here to show everybody would help. They know that they're not perfect. They know that they're special. That's what some of them say to me, at least, that they know they're special, because they don't really like to refer to themselves as having disabilities. They like to say they're special. And so they know this, they're aware of that. They don't want the community to throw that back at them because it's perceived negatively when that happens. So having that education to understand that they're just like you and I.
Still get patients once in a while. I had a patient the other day that came in and said that they weren't being able to be seen at their office that they were currently at because they didn't get a vaccination. I'm like, are you kidding me? And so a lot of my patients actually come to us because I back the blue. I believe in freedom of speech and freedom to decide if you want to put something in your body or not. So we have 90% of my patients, and I accept everybody. I don't care if you have purple hair. I don't care if I don't care if you're transgender. I don't care. Like, I'm accepting of everybody. I don't care. I don't really care, as long as to me, it's more important if they're just a good individual.
Okay, so Michael joins us, Calcano, and he's with what's the name of your organization again? All I can think about is Primaries.
All Oregon Votes.
All Oregon Votes, and looking to open the primary in Oregon. So, Michael, tell people a little of your history. Where did this kind of stick this? Because this is your first attempt at doing this. You've had all kinds of little ideas about this. So something's burrowing in your chest there, and I want to know what it is.
Well, I first ran for office when I was 26 years old, and I was elected to serve on the school board at Mount Hood Community College, right? So I really care about income inequality. I think it's one of the biggest problems we have today. The rich keep getting richer, and everyone in the middle class is sort of just treading water, and that's a problem. We need to have more economic opportunity for regular people, not just those in the top 1%. Right. And I think that we need to create opportunities. And, when I was a board member, I saw that, we didn't have really great state funding for community colleges, even though Democrats in Oregon talk a lot about supporting, opportunities for lower income students. Right. And so, that was sort of the first, sort of curiosity. And then I had an opportunity to go work for Dennis Richardson, who was elected as Secretary of State. Right. And Dennis really cared about trying to figure out how to tackle gerrymandering. Gerrymandering obviously is a big problem. Right? You crack and pack the districts, the boundaries, and you can rig elections in favor of a political party that's in power, right? If the power to do redistricting, to do the redrawing of the lines rests with the state legislature, a partisan situation, then gerrymandering is going to happen. And in Oregon, we have been getting a rating of F for our maps. They are gerrymandered to hell, right?
Real quick, Michael, when I lived in Springfield area, I lived out in the country, and most of my area was country, like Crestwell, all these little rural communities, and then they swiped in the University of Oregon. So you're supposed to be district in like-minded communities. Not everybody's a Republican or a Democrat, but people who have like interests. What interest does the University of Oregon and college professors have with a bunch of hicks that live out in the country? It was obvious it was done to discount our votes and make our district heavy on the D side, where there's a lot of D's out there, but on the more liberal side rather than conservative. So it was a total misrepresentation, and that's happening all over. We saw it last time with the new congressional seat, and so that Dennis was going to attack that. And so how did that impact you with the open primary?
Well, it's they're both problems that need to be solved. And Dennis really wanted to solve the problem of gerrymandering because it takes power away from the people and it gives it to those in power. And Dennis really cared about it. But guess what? He hit a brick wall with the democratically controlled state legislature, right? So at the time, we had Speaker of the House Tina Kotek, we had Senate President Peter Courtney, and his momentum was basically stymied, because of the folks in power not wanting any kind of legislation to move forward, right? And I mean, I think voting rights they have never been more important than they are today. And unfortunately, all of these efforts to create good government in our country are being met by opposition, by the folks that are part of the establishment and that hold the power. And it takes we the people out of it, right? Elections are not decided by us anymore.
No, and this is the Republicans are just as bad as the Democrats. I mean, this isn't nobody has clean hands when it comes to, if we had a super majority of Republicans in Oregon, they'd be gerrymandering probably just as much as anybody else. I mean, that power goes to people's heads. And they draw the lines to protect what they think is the right thing rather than going, what I don't understand, Michael, sometimes is what happened to the word fair? The other F word. We have the freedom word we can't use, but fair. I mean, I would not I'm an old fart, I guess, but I wouldn't want to win cheating. And I don't want, when you think about an entire state and a public servant, wouldn't you want to go into, if I was a Republican and was a winner, I'd go into the Democrats just as much and say, what do you guys want? How do we put something together that reflects what Oregon is? Because it's not what this is. We don't look like what we are. We've become an established, I don't know, we're more purple than we are blue. And I think all we see is blue.
We're living in a tribalistic culture,
Yeah.
and the folks in power just want to continue the narrative that we hate each other's guts. And that's just not true, right?
Right.
We need to elevate and become more enlightened as a people and say that, the narrative, the false narrative that has been propagated and promoted is to keep us from finding common ground. And open primaries is a way to do that. Right?
Is that kind of how you feel like the open primary would be? Here's kind of Oregon, not Oregon taking back Oregon, the people of Oregon saying, do you think that if we did this, if this really happened and people started seeing fair elections, that they'd be more involved? Because I think a lot of people right now feel like, and that's Democrats or Republicans, I think they all feel like this is how it's going, and this is Oregon, this is what always happens, and that false narrative you talk about, though there's no hope.
Yeah, I was born here in Portland, so I'm a native Oregonian and I love my home state, but I hate seeing what it's become. I mean,
Yeah.
I live in Portland today, and Portland has some pretty severe problems. If you turn on the news, you probably have read or seen about it. So
Right.
we could be doing so much better as a state if we had a stronger public sector that delivered on the expectations of the people, right? So Portlanders, folks who live in Multnomah County and across the state, have higher expectations than the public sector is delivering. And unfortunately, it's eroding people's faith in democracy, faith in government, and it's sort of unraveling the social fabric, right? And it's a problem.
Do you think, well, look what's happening with this Greater Idaho movement. I mean, Wallowa County was the latest one just a few weeks ago that voted.
So there's
and
12
said,
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and out of 13, there's 12 that have said we want to look into joining Idaho, and I understand that, and I don't think that it's not wrong or right. I enjoy the conversation, but I think what should be telling to the leaders of Oregon is something's not going well when you've got a whole bunch of people in the state who want the hell out.
Yeah.
And they really don't want out. They love Oregon, but they don't want to be part of the political structure that's not listening to them anymore.
Yeah. Democracy is a really unique form of government in which the power of government is derived by the consent of the governed. And when 12 out of Oregon's 36 counties want to secede from the state, that's not the consent of the governed. And
Right.
in our partisan primary system, when we lock out independent voters, that is not the consent of the governed. So our democracy is facing some significant challenges across the country, and in Oregon, it's amplified, I think, and we have to start working together to enact these solutions that are not Trojan horses for one side or the other. Right. They are about honoring the foundation of American democracy.
I think what I said earlier, and I don't think I said it when we were live, I don't remember, but I want to make sure people understand. But what I always thought was odd, and still is, we all pay for it. So there's more non-affiliated voters now than Democrats and more than Republicans. And so all of us, all those people, like I was back there, are paying for the two parties to do their business. Mm-hmm. We even pay for them to elect their precinct leaders. And even the county, I talked to elections clerks, and they said they think that is completely wrong. So they want to send out your own damn ballots. You want us to do your precinct work for you. So you know what I mean? Just from a taxation standpoint, it's like if we all have to pay for the primary, then we should all be allowed to play in the primary. And
Yeah, partisan primaries cost the state of Oregon about $5 million a year to benefit the GOP, to benefit the Democratic Party, right? $5 million that could go to schools or anything else. And so if they're going to be publicly funded primaries, then they should allow all taxpayers, registered voters into those elections, right? Voting rights should not be preconditioned on you pledging allegiance to a potentially questionable national political party, right?
Well, and Michael, you know what bugs me, and I know you've heard this too, is every time this comes up, one of the arguments, it's not really an argument, but excuses, I would call it, is party people, Republicans and Democrats, will say, well, all you have to do is switch, and then you can vote in the primary, and then just switch back to what you were before. And it's like, okay, so what if I don't want to be you? What if I don't want to be a Democrat and I don't want to be a Republican? So why should I have to become like you so that I can play in a primary that I pay for and that is just deciding another one of you? So what about a one of me, like a non-affiliated candidate that wants to run? And what are their chances if it's open? It's much better than the closed primary. What are the lies? What are some of the misinterpretations, like the things you come up against? I really like talking to you, Michael. This is fun. So because you're a smart dude. I hope someday you run again for something bigger, because I don't even care if we agree on our politics. It doesn't matter to me. I think you have a great heart, and you really give a shit about the voices of people, and that's what we're supposed to be about.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever run again, but we do need more conscientious people who run for office and can win. And right now, I think that the caliber of folks who are staying in politics, they're really tracking to the extremes, the far left and the far right. And the partisan primary, what it does is it incentivizes candidates to pander to the fringes, right? And so that amplifies the rhetoric, right? And it amplifies the toxicity of politics, and it turns people completely off. And for a while, I was disaffected and I was apathetic and I tuned out. But I think that my nature is that I can't just stand by and not do anything. I've got to try to make life better and move upstream, because if we can adjust the structure of how we conduct elections and the incentives that we're providing to elected officials, then I think we can fix a lot of the downstream problems like mental health or public schools or drug addiction. I mean, these things are really important that we fix them because we want to raise our kids here and give them a good future.
Right. Don't you think that we're closer than we think? I mean, in terms of, okay, so, let's just take homelessness in Oregon. So here's an issue, and the way that they're handling it now is not working. But you brought up the solutions. It's why aren't we funding mental health services? Why are we incentivizing people to live on the streets, which is cruel and unkind? Why are we not going out and look at trying to get the fentanyl off the streets? It's what is so weird to me is I think most Oregonians want the same thing. We want a livable place. We want people to be taken care of, but we're going at it the way the parties do, and their focus and a cultural focus, rather than going in and saying, guys, we need to spend millions and millions of dollars, Governor Kotek, but the housing thing you're doing, it ain't going to do crap. What we need to do is be helping these people get their lives back together. Put the money into mental health services. We solve the homeless problem, or at least do something to really, make a dent in it. But we're not even talking about those things. Oh, people blab about it, but no money's actually going to it. We do what looks right rather than what is right.
Yeah, and I think that too often we get sidetracked, right? We get pulled off course, and we don't actually want to. Elected officials don't actually want to sit down together. They would just rather sling mud, because that helps with the reelection campaign.
Right, and especially when you have a closed primary, like you were saying, is there's more partisan rhetoric in the primary. It kind of dissipates when you get to the general, because people have to try to get members of the other parties to come together. So if you opened up that primary, the people aren't going to go for all that slamming and mudslinging and, and making it sound like Republicans are the best and Democrats are the best. If you go in there, you have to pander to everybody, and you might put people on some better behavior. So tell me what, okay, I got to go, just so many things. Let me ask you this real fast, and then we're going to get into, I want you to tell me what we need for the open primary to move forward, what the steps are. I saw them on your list, but before you do that, I want to know, as a 35-year-old dude in Oregon, what gives you hope about the state of Oregon? Just like your heart, what is it that, because I don't get to talk to young dudes like you very often publicly like
yeah this. I think that Oregon has incredible people, and I think that Oregon has incredible opportunity to demonstrate our values, right? So we have really strong values in Oregon: clean water, clean air, right? We should have clean elections too. I mean, that's the bottom line. I think that we have money in politics, which is a huge problem. Gerrymandering, huge problem. Closed primaries, huge problem. So we've got some big problems, but I think that there also is lots of opportunity for optimism in our state, right? Oregon has such a history and legacy of being about people, being about voters. We were one of the first states in the nation to allow voters to directly initiative petition, right?
Yeah,
so the right of referendum. Yeah. So we have to reclaim the trailblazer status that Oregon, was known for, right? And I think that this is a great way to do it.
And the reason, the reason you're picking the open primary is because gerrymandering won't stop as long as there's one party that's heavier than the other party. And it's not including that huge chunk of non-affiliated voters in the middle. And so this is a way to chip away at that, because if you can get elections to be fair again, or fairer, and start bringing some candidates that look like people in the middle, rather than these extremists, then you could actually start getting people in there that go, like a Dennis Richardson, who says gerrymandering is a problem for all parties, and we need to. Is that? I know I sense that you really liked him, and for Dennis died, had a brain tumor, and it was a tragic thing. But he didn't get a lot of credit while he was here. Is there kind of just a little part of you that goes, man, if I get this done, it would be kind of like even though that wasn't his thing, it would be a crack in the, in that armor to kind of move it forward. I think he'd be pretty honored by that.
Dennis Richardson supported open primaries back in 2014.
Yeah.
And I think that he would be pretty proud of the campaign today. And I think that ultimately he was a Republican, sure, but he was an Oregonian, and he also was a veteran. I mean, he served in Vietnam, right? So beyond military service, beyond being a really brilliant legal mind, beyond being a state lawmaker, he was just a good man. He had good character. He had integrity. And I think there were so many people. I mean, Oregon hadn't elected a statewide elected official Republican in 30 years before Dennis Richardson, right?
And Vic Attia was the last one in the executive branch before Dennis. Dennis got some new territory in there. And you're right, he was a statesman, kind of like a Mark Hatfield kind of guy, where it was about Oregon first, and your party was second. And,
one of the most, I think, profound things he decided to do as Secretary of State was use his power as the chief auditing officer to evaluate Portland Public Schools' performance as it related to students of color. And I thought that was such an important audit. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like reading audits, but if you go and you look at that audit, I mean, I think it was so revealing, and it actually changed the course of PPS and how they are addressing equity. And a lot of people, especially Democrats, don't necessarily want to think about the ways in which Republicans might be bending the arc of justice. But Dennis cared about it. I mean, he really did.
So give us a real quick, what happens from here? And then I can't put this on, and since I'm recording this, I can't put on your website stuff, but you can come on when this airs and do that. But how do people get a hold of you, and what's the timeline? Kind of give people an idea what happens now.
Yeah, so we have about 12 months to collect about 200,000 signatures.
We can do it.
So we're going to be clipboarding around the state, farmers markets, the state fair, county fairs. We'll be at the DMVs, so we'll be across Oregon with clipboards asking people to sign their signatures to put this on the ballot. And so in July of 2024, we'll turn in our signatures, and then voters in November of 2024 will have an opportunity to vote yes for voting rights in Oregon.
So, so does the 200,000 what you need, or is that counting all the extras you need because they're going to cancel a lot of them out?
It's 160, so our buffer is 200. Yeah.
Okay. So, Michael, here's what I want you to do is when you're doing this, thinking ahead of what you're doing, like every couple months when you're gathering signatures, let's have you back or somebody else that you find that's really affected by this. That would be like a great person to talk to people about why it's so important. And we'll just hammer this thing along so people understand why, because I think what's really smart on your side is by 2024, I think people are going to really have a very clear idea of how powerful these two parties are and how much we're left out of the process. And maybe they'll go, you know what? I'm plugging my nose at doing this, but over here is where I'm going to stick my power. And I pray to God that happens, because I think if it does, I'm going to be screaming and having a bottle of champagne. And I think you really could change Oregon that way. I think Oregon could change Oregon that way and get it back to what you want.
Rick, I can't thank you enough. We'll definitely be back on, and we'll be beating this drum. And what we've found is one of our strongest messages are veterans. So we have U.S. military veterans actively involved with our campaign. They, many of them, more than 50%, identify as independents. They take an oath to protect and defend the country, not necessarily red or blue, but red, white, and blue, right? And so Oregon is home to about 150,000 military veterans who have served their country who are independent. And so, I think that we're going to be doing quite a lot of grassroots outreach around the state. And so I can't thank you enough for having us on.
I'll stick you with one of them, and that way you can clean up and make sure just let them be the heart and soul and you be the mind, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, thank you, Rick.
You're welcome. All right, so there's your chance. And I'm sorry, yes, it is my pet topic. It's like I love this issue because I really do believe, like Michael's saying, this could change. It could make Oregon my great grandparents came to Oregon from the Midwest, and what my grandpa Dancer came from Oklahoma, and my other ones were pioneers and homesteaded in Baker City, Oregon, and so and they were all Democrats. All my relatives were the old kind of Democrats, where you're Democrat because you don't mess with people, you give them a voice. And I grew up with my grandparents saying, but be careful what you say, but you can say whatever you want to say. And that's how it should be. And that's Oregon. I mean, we're like vibrant, interesting, thought-provoking people. And we're letting two parties run us when it really should be us running them. Because the thing we always forget is the politicians work for us. And we've allowed that to change. And opening the primary, I know it doesn't sound that important, but it's super important. And that could then chip away at gerrymandering. It could get back to fairness in politics. And I know I'm a dreamer, but what else do? You dream, but you put action behind it. So Michael's the action behind my dream. And it's obviously his dream too. All right, share this on your page. It's really important because other people need to see this. And again, we want to thank our sponsors, Chris Dental Family Dentistry, Albert Taylor, Endless Possibilities, and BS Free MD. Remember, Tim and May will be on right after this on Facebook on the BS Free MD Facebook page, live with Doctails and Cocktails. And you never know what you're going to get from those two. All right, have a good evening. Good night.